My name is Monique Wells. I am the founder and CEO of the Wells International Foundation, president of the French nonprofit association Les Amis de Beauford Delaney, co-founder of Discover Paris, creator of Entree to Black Paris Tours, and I am also the president of the preclinical safety consultancy, Toxicology Pathology Services. Well, I chose Beauford. First of all, I want to say that the reason that I love Beauford Delaney, I love his story, I love his work, is because he was a friend of James Baldwin. And a few years ago, I was researching an article on African American grave sites in and around Paris, and I knew that Beauford was buried somewhere in this area, and I started to research where his grave was located, and I fell upon this absolutely enchanting, poignant, just engrossing story about this man. I found out that he was buried in an unmarked grave outside of Paris in a cemetery. It's a huge cemetery. It's part of the Paris cemetery system, but it is located in a suburb of Paris, so it's outside of the city limits. I went there just to take a photograph of the grave because I was including the photographs of all the grave sites, and I learned that his grave was not marked, and he was in a pauper's division in this cemetery, and it was very difficult even to determine exactly which space he was in because that particular division was overrun with weeds. About half of the space in that division, it looks like it's empty because there are no stones there, and the others are really old and in bad shape. I had to ask friends of Beauford Delaney about the location of this grave, etc. And when they came back to me with the information, they asked me, was Beauford still buried there? And prior to that point, I did not know that the way that people are buried in France, well, there's a system, and you have a grave, and you have to continue, or someone has to continue to pay for you to occupy that space. And if that money is not paid, then the cemetery, after a while, has the right to exhume your remains and either place them in a common grave, or if they're ashes, sprinkle them in a garden. And this was just really news to me, and for most Americans, that's shocking. So these friends of Beauford were saying, he's in this cemetery, here's the division, here's the plot, is he still there? So I go out, I'm wearing a sort of the euphemistic reporter's hat, and I go to the cemetery office and inquire, and they don't want to give me any information because I'm not family. The first thing they will always ask is, are you family? And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to write a story. Well, we really don't have to tell you anything, blah, blah. But in the end, I was able to learn that the grave was going to be exhumed that year. So I'm just coming along at just the right time, quote unquote. And I take this information back to the friends of Beauford Delaney. And they ask, well, what can we do to keep the grave intact? And so I've sort of become an intermediary in this whole story. And I'm the only person in Paris. The friends are in the US or the UK. And so I am able to ascertain that the cost of keeping the grave intact was going to be less than 300 euros. I did mention that Beauford was a painter and that the French government owns his work. And that got their attention. And so they're like, well, he is an artist, and so maybe exceptionally we will allow you to pay this money for his grave. And so the friends of Beauford Delaney sent me that money, and I paid it. And it was always made clear to me, you have no rights, you're not family, blah, blah, blah. The family can come in at any time and take they can do whatever they want. So the fact that you've paid gives you no rights whatsoever. I'm like, I'm clear. The friends were so happy that they said, oh my goodness, you know, you've done something that we have wanted to do from afar and this and that. We want to place a stone at the gravesite. What would that take? How much would it cost? Can we get permission? Blah, blah. By then, I have heard all of these friends' stories about Beaufort, and knowing already how much he influenced James Baldwin, and how Baldwin in turn, when Beaufort came to Paris, sort of acted as Beaufort's mentor. I should say that Beaufort Delaney suffered from mental illness, and Baldwin really became sort of almost a caretaker for him, and at the end was literally named as part of a committee to take care of Beaufort's affairs while he was in a mental institution in Paris. That combined with the real, real life stories of these people who are so happy that Beaufort's grave is intact and they want to place a stone, I'm now becoming personally involved in this man's story. And I found out the cost of placing a stone. I don't remember it exactly, but it's written on the blog somewhere. And I said, it's too much for me to collect. I'm not going to collect that in my name. So I started a foundation. I started a French nonprofit called Les Amis de Beaufort Delaney, which means Friends of Beaufort Delaney, to collect the money to place that stone. And I started a blog about Beaufort because I wanted to give legitimacy to the fundraising effort. I wanted people to know that, this wasn't just some kind of a sham. We are devoted to raising this money for this man. This is why you should care about him. This is what he's done here. This is, the kind of work that he did, et cetera, et cetera. And I started that blog in 2009, and I'm still writing it today. A lot of people thought or think that Beaufort came to France because he was fleeing the United States because, he was born in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1901, so, Southern black male. And he was gay, so, all strikes against him. And people automatically think that because he came to Paris, he came after the Second World War, people think that he was fleeing something. But when you read the only biography that is written by Beaufort, you learn that Beaufort thought of this coming to France as a vacation. He thought it was going to be a summer vacation. And he was actually going to go to Rome to see a friend of his, actually one of the friends of Beaufort Delaney, who got this whole Les Amis thing started. So it's sort of shocking, that here's a man who had every reason to flee, but in fact, he was just coming to Europe because he wanted to visit friends, and because as an artist, he was a modernist, so he was influenced by a lot of artists who became famous in France, artists like Matisse. He wanted to walk the streets where these artists walked and go to museums in Paris and see their work here. It really wasn't about leaving. It was about looking for something that enriched his soul as an artist and wanted to keep his friendships intact. And I think, although my story is very different in terms of its details, we came here for the same reason. I think the bottom line is that individuals can make a difference, and as long as you are true to yourself and not afraid of showing who you are to other people and sharing who you are with other people, then even the smallest things that you might consider in the moment very insignificant, can be life-changing. And so really, I think the example is that, or the moral of the story is that You lead by example. You lead by living your best life and by sharing that life with others. And so I take inspiration from those stories, and I try to be the best example that I can be by living my life the best way that I can be and just being an example for others. Leading by example is one of the 3 pillars of a women's group that I have founded called the L-Cubed Alliance. And leadership, it's critical. It's critical, and it's critical not only just from a human standpoint, but I think from the African American standpoint, it is critical that people can see that African Americans can go anywhere and do anything, anywhere in the world. You know, my story is very atypical. I'm not a musician. I'm not a writer. I mean, I'm not a writer in the sense I'm not a novelist, or, you know, I'm a scientist. I happen to have fallen in love with history and am learning every day about art. And I am making a difference. I'm making a difference in people's lives quite by accident. You know, I'm just following my passion and sharing it. So Discover Paris is my husband's and my travel planning service. And we are at www.discoverparis.net. Okay. I write the Entree to Black Paris blog, which is at entreetoblackparis.blogspot.com. I also write the Les Amis de Beauford Delaney blog. That's Les Amis de Beauford Delaney.blogspot.com. For the Wells International Foundation, it's wells-internationalfoundation.org. My women's group, the L-Cubed Alliance, that's L as in Larry, the number 3, ALLIANCE .com.